guys, we're getting ready to start on the third engine in this triple build, and that's the engine for Mr. Mo's 1970 Pontiac GTO convertible. As you see, we got all the parts laid out here. They've already been painted. I've been doing a little bit of detail work to them, just adding some details to it, painting up some of the parts and doing a little wash over it, as that helps to bring out quite a few of the details in the model itself of the engine, and just adds shadows. I always say that when you do a little bit of a wash, it adds scale to the model, gives it size and heft, and it really does help to bring out all of the details. So we have here, you can see the intake's got a little bit of wash on it. That brings out all of the shapes and of the runners in the intake. So it's not just a big mass of blue. And I made a few modifications to this engine. And let me just run them past you so you guys can see what we've done. Now, the first thing I modified was that I put an oil filter housing on the side of the block here. This is, the model actually had the oil filter, which is attached to the oil pan, but there was nothing above the oil filter. It just kind of sat there with a big empty space. So what I did was I took a piece of sprue, as you saw earlier in the build series, and glued it to the top of the oil filter. Then I cut it and shaped it to kind of simulate a photo I saw of an oil filter adapter that's bolted to the side of the block. And then I put a small plate on the side of the block there to finish off the oil filter housing that's bolted to the engine. I think that does work a lot better than what the actual engine had, which was pretty much nothing, just an oil filter hanging there. Let me see if I have a picture of it. I'll put it up here, a before picture, so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about, or you can just go back to the other videos and you'll see it as I'm putting it all together. And then another thing I did was I added the ribs to the side of the engine here. Now, I know that may not be 100% accurate, but there was no detail on this engine block at all. I mean, nothing. And I just thought that if I added these ribs here to the side of the block, they would just look like reinforcement ribs on the block, and add some detail to it that was really sorely lacking. And once I put the exhaust manifolds on there, they'll be hidden underneath there, and they'll just be something that look a little more visually interesting than just these empty sides of the block here. And then I went ahead and painted all of these small details. I used my brass colors from Citadel Paint just to highlight the bolts. Again, just to give some visual detail and make the engine much more interesting to look at than just the plain colors that were on there. Again, may not be 100% accurate, but once this is all in the car, all you're going to see is this little bit of color peeking out from there, which is just going to make it more interesting. Now we have our valve covers, which were done with the Revell chrome. Again, you can see that stuff really does look amazing. Very happy with it. Now, the biggest question with this stuff is how durable is it? And as you saw on the last engine, yeah, you can still dull it out by touching it, but it takes a lot more effort to damage it than it does any of the other chrome that I've used previously. The all-clad stuff is great, but also has a bit of a durability issue. And the all-clad is not as bright as the Revell chrome. I mean, the Revell chrome is really the brightest, shiniest chrome that I've seen so far. And the all-clad is great. I really enjoy using it, and it does really have a good effect, similar to what we have here in my unfinished chrome marrow that I was building for last year's small-scale group build and never finished because of issues that I ran into with it. But you can see it's got a really great chrome finish, and that's using all-clad paints. But when you look at the brightness of the chrome, really nothing matches what this Revell chrome does. Now, I did try Molotov Chrome, and I sprayed it through my airbrush, and that also gave me a really, I mean, amazing chrome-like finish, very similar to the Revell. But the minute I touched it, you guys know what happened. All right, and here we have our alternator. Just painted in some details there, again, just creating some visual interest. We have our belt drive assembly, which is going to undergo modifications because I have to figure out how I'm going to do it. But Mr. Mo has air conditioning in his, which means I have to add another pulley and scratch build a AC compressor to fit to the car. But I'm going to have to wait on that until I get closer to installing the engine to the chassis and the body, because I got to see exactly how it's going to fit in there. So for right now, this is what we have as our belt drive assembly. Similar to the other belt drives that we saw on the previous builds, it's done with the Mr. Hobby black primer. And then I just took some Vallejo clear, a gloss clear, and painted up the pulleys just so that they stand out apart from the belts. And then just used my Citadel paints to highlight the bolts. Now the rest, we have our fan, we have our distributor, which I am right now just playing with the idea of how I'm going to drill this out and use it as a wire it up for the engine, as I do plan on wiring this particular engine up. We have our exhaust manifolds, and then we have our air cleaner housings. Now this is the one that came with the kit, and after looking at pictures of Mr. Mo's air cleaner, I'm going to put one up right here. His has 2 snorkels on it, and lo and behold, I was looking through the kit for the was it the one of the I think it was the other GTO kit, and it came with a single snorkel air cleaner. Now Mr. Mo has 2 snorkels on his, so I'm going to fabricate one coming out of this side here to match what's in his car, and that's got to be painted black once I figure out exactly how I'm going to do that. So there you go, guys. This is the start of the second, well, not the second, I'm sorry. This is the start of the third engine, which is going to finish off all of our engine assembly, and then we're going to move off to the chassis on all 3 cars. So let's get going on this engine build. One note when you're installing the headers, you have to make sure you get the angle right on them, as they have to sit flush with the heads to give you the correct look and the correct angle, as they angle away from the block. When you put them on, they're going to want to flip down and contact the block, so that's the one thing you got to stop. The way these manifolds attach to the block is really not very secure. And I can see knocking them off very easily. Not only that, the engraving is not great on these, so they actually look like 6-cylinder manifold instead of a V8. If you can see that. Now, I know the two center ports are together, but I'm really not thrilled with the look of that. What we have left to install are the belts, the fan, the alternator. Okay, guys, now one of the things about this kit is that nothing fits the way it's supposed to. It is there. I mean, it is such a sloppy fit on almost everything here that you gotta go slow. You gotta make sure everything is lining up. You gotta make sure the glue sets up right, because it really is just a bad sloppy fit no matter what you do. But it's going together, and it really is not looking horrible. You can see the Revell Chrome really just works beautifully. Alright guys, now it's time to start wiring up this distributor. I've already used my micro drills to drill the holes in the distributor itself, which was a little tough considering how small it is. But I have all 8 holes drilled in there for the 8 spark plugs. And now I'm using my wires, which are basically leftover wires from the LEDs that I used on the Thunderbird build. They were micro LEDs and the wires were so slim, and when I took a look at them, I'm like, you know what? All of this extra wire is perfect for wiring up these engines. So instead of going out and ordering more spark plug wire, I'm just reusing those. So now all I do is dip the end of the wire in a little bit of super glue and then insert it right into the distributor, into the holes that I've drilled. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this, and then we'll be back. For here we have our fully wired distributor, which now we have to see if it'll actually fit the engine, because nothing else really seems to fit this very well. Yes, it does fit very well, nicely there. Alright guys, I forgot to paint the bottom half of the distributor. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull out our trusty Testors metallic silver. At least I think that's, yes, this is the metallic silver. And this is a really great color. Say what you will about these Testors paints, they do cover very well. They're all enamels, and I still have quite a few bottles of this stuff. I love all my Tamiyas and Vallejos and all the other different types of paints, but these Testors cover great. They brush on easily and definitely are great for certain uses. So I still have quite a few of them. What about you guys? Let me know in the comments. Do you guys have these Testors paints? Do you still use them? What do you guys think of them? All right, I'm going to go ahead and paint this, and then we're going to attach our distributor. Alright guys, we're now in the process of wiring up this engine. Saw how I did the distributor. Now I've got the spark plug wires going into each cylinder. We've also added some spark plug boots, so I'm just going to go over real quick how I did that as I installed the last one here. Now the first thing I did was drill the holes in the block previously, and when I drilled the holes through the block, through the heads, I also went into the block so that I can have all the excess wire going right into the engine so you wouldn't see it. Because unlike most cylinder heads on some models, these are open on the bottom here. So I found that as I passed the wire through the cylinder head, it came poking right out here below the manifold. So what I had to do was drill the hole at a slightly different angle right into the block so that all that excess wire is now inside this block. Now, in order to make the boots for the spark plug wires, what I took was a little bit of heat shrink tubing. heated it up till it got to the proper diameter that I needed for my wires. Now, once I have my piece of heat shrink tubing cut to size, what I do is I take it and I slide it over the wire. Let me see if I can show you guys this on camera. Slide it over the wire. And then I'm going to take the wire and I'm going to insert it into the cylinder head. Making sure that it goes all the way into the block and doesn't just come out the bottom of the cylinder head. Now I could have just cut the wire shorter to make sure, and that way I wouldn't have to run so much into the cylinder head, but what I found was that doing it this way, it anchors the wire in the block so it doesn't come out on me as I'm trying to route it all the way in there. Now I'm going to take my boot, slide it down, and give my wires a little bit of tug down just so that we have a little gravity affecting it. And there we go. Here's our boot. Now what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of super glue right there where the wire enters the block. Just put a drop there. And then we're going to slide the boot right into position right there. And then we're going to just shape the wires here so that they have more of a realistic right down here on the block, because you want them to look like gravity's affecting them, so that they're draped on the block, not just floating in the air. So there we go. And we're gonna shape these a little bit. No, let's get that, make sure that that boot sits in the right position. Right there. It looks pretty good to me. And there we go, guys. We have our fully wired engine. Not only is it fully wired, but I think I even got the firing order correct. So that way we know it'll start. But I think this is going to do exactly where it's going to be exactly where I want it right there. Okay, let's continue with the build. Alright, guys. Okay, guys, we've installed the carburetor, or what it's supposed to be a carburetor. Not a very convincing looking one, but it's in there. We got a little bit of detail painting done to it just to try and make it look like something. And now I'm trying to fit the belts, and I just realized the two pegs, if we look at the instructions, which I'll put up right here, the belts, two pegs are supposed to slot into the two holes here on the water pump and timing cover. Unfortunately, when you try to fit them, the pegs are just way too long. And that's because they didn't form the, I guess, the openings here deep enough to allow the peg to go in. So I got a choice of either drilling those out or just snipping the pegs off a little bit. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is just snip up the pegs here a little bit. And let's see how we do with this. Only need enough to center them. So that they sit flush against the block. Gonna have to snip a little bit more off of the water pump pulley. And I do believe that's going to work there. Alright, so let's just go ahead and put a little bit of super glue there. Okay guys, now I just ran into something that I didn't notice before well, because I hadn't mounted it yet. But now that I have the pulleys and everything sitting flush against the block, you can see that the alternator is touching the block there. It's just way too close, which is going to kind of throw off the alignment of the belts. Still looks pretty good, but just something that annoys me a little bit, as I don't see any way to get around that other than shaving down the alternator a bit so that it sits totally, so that it doesn't touch the block at all. Other than that, I don't really see any other way around it, but still looks pretty good. Like I said, this kit is very, let's just say that it's got a lot of fit issues, and it's going to require a lot of thinking out as you're doing it, which is part of the fun, I gotta admit. So the only thing left now to do is to throw the fan on the front, and then I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do about the air cleaner. So let's just throw the fan on right now while we're here and get that out of the way, because then the last part left is the air cleaner, which can always be done at a later date. Okay, so there we go. Our engine's primarily done, maybe adding some more things to it, but for now, it's pretty much completed. Even have a little solenoid on top of the starter. Not too bad, not too bad. But trust me guys, if you're going to build this kit, you got quite a bit of work ahead of you to make everything look halfway decent. Alright guys, the engine's pretty much done. Now, I may change this carburetor as I'm really not happy with it. So I'm looking into some aftermarket alternatives. So that's something that we'll look at down the line if I can find something I like. Now, right now we're going to talk about the air cleaner. This is the air cleaner that came with the engine. Now, if we look at the air cleaner that's in Mr. Mo's car, which I'm going to put up right here on the screen, you'll notice that it has two snorkels, whereas this air cleaner is just your simple basic round air cleaner. Nothing really similar to what Mr. Mo has in his car. So we're not going to be using this. Now, I've shown previously the air cleaner that came with the Super Stocker, which had one snorkel already attached to it. So I thought that using this, I could replicate Mr. Mo's car. So what I did was I cut a small piece of sheet styrene, similar to in size to the snorkel here, and shaped it to fit the air cleaner. Then I just measured out where I needed to put it, glued it on with some Tamiya cement, and boom, we have our twin snorkel air cleaner. Now, on Mr. Mo's air cleaner, there are two small valves which are attached to the air cleaner itself with these two small round circular objects that are on top of each snorkel. So what I did was I took a little bit of aluminum rod that I had and just cut up down two small pieces and attached them to simulate the two small valves that are in the snorkel. Now, on Mr. Mo's car, it sits in this position, So I'm going to be painting the snorkel black, just like the one in his car. But we're not going to be installing it right away, as we're going to have to make sure that it's going to fit with all the other components that go into the engine compartment. But if it does, it's going to sit just like that. And let's see if I can put it on here so we can just see. It's going to sit just like that, with one snorkel pointing forward and the other one pointing to the side. But like I said, once we get the painting done, it's not going to go onto the engine until I find myself a good replacement for this carburetor here, because I'm really not happy with it. And once I do that, then we'll worry about the air cleaner and see where it's going to fit on the body or in the engine compartment, along with some other details that I may be throwing in. So guys, that's going to be it. I'm going to end this video here, as there's really not any further we can go with the engine until we get this air cleaner and carburetor thing sorted out. So we're going to move on to other parts of the car in the next couple of episodes. I think we're going to start with the chassis. So I'm going to end it here. And remember guys, like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, as it really helps the channel. And give me some comments. Let me know what you guys think of the build so far and how it's going. Alright guys, I'm gonna go now. So I will see you on the next one.